We're not through with Thoreau, and we hadn't thoroughly studied Thoreau, and I haven't been thrown out, and we're not through with Thoreau. So we wanted to continue page 390. Back home in Concord, Thoreau watched the dog days of midsummer come in, writing in his own journal every morning and panting in the hot afternoons through sprout lands and corpses as the mercury climbed to 98 in the shade. Why is it so hot? They had global warming back then, and now it's cooled off. So global warming is may have happened in the past. It was so damp that his pressed flowers all mildewed, and the family washing wouldn't dry. It's moist here and it's humid, but he loved the moist hot air and drew it deep into his lungs like a vapor bath. He liked humidity. The berries were so thick they blackened the hillsides, 5 or 6 species deep. And on August 4th, he led the annual berry party to Canantum, where they picked blackberries big as thumbs and huckleberries big as bullets. Storms broke on August 8, and that day, just as Henry was about to rise from the dinner table to inspect the flooding river of servant, burst through Thoreau, burst through the door and exclaimed, in the words of a witness, "Faith, the pig's out o' the pen, and the way he's tearing rough Rory's fur birds and is for scare everybody. Faith, the pig's out o' the pen, and on the way he's tearing rough Rory's fur birds and enough to scare everybody." While Henry John and Michael Flannery ran to pursue the marauder, the ladies, quote, flew to the windows to see the fray, unquote. Afterward, Thoreau wrote up, quote, "The capture of the pig." It reminds me, I used to hunt fish for pigs. You take an ear of corn and you strip the middle and you tie a piece of twine around the corn, the whole ear of corn, field corn. Tie some twine to it, then you go to the corn crib, then you lower the corn down into the pig pen. As a child, you can go fishing for pigs, except for the time when Alice fell into the pig pen. That was scary. And who rescued Alice? The capture of the pig as a shaky dog comedy worthy of Mark Twain. This is as good as Mark Twain. As his energy returned, Thoreau grew restless. He wanted to see September, and he decided that a look at the Concord River would help him see September on the Concord. On September 5th, he took the cars. Now, when he takes the cars, he must be saying the train. He took the cars to Brattleboro, Vermont. shouldering his valise and walking the tracks from Fitchburg to Westminster rather than waiting for the next train. The Connecticut was disappointing. That's an interesting way. I mean, remember how you could get off the subway or the train one stop short of your destination, so you have the opportunity to walk, and you can walk to the next station. That's an idea. The Connecticut was disappointing, narrow and shallow even at high water. The Concord is worth 100 of it for my purposes, he sniffed. But the botanizing was grand, and the welcome warm. For 4 days he tramped. Seems he's tramped a lot through the mountains, more than me. I'm very upset now. For 4 days he tramped the mountains, fields, and woods with Reverend Addison Brown, who ran a local girls' school, his wife Anne, who had a fair flair for botany and astronomy, their daughters Frances and Mary, and their botanist friend Charles Christopher Frost, who made shoes. The Brown girls led Thoreau up the local mountain, which the Francis called by the indigenous name Wantastiquat. Wantastiquah. Mary recalled how their guest, who seemed to know everything, kept asking her all sorts of questions. That's interesting. Someone who knows everything, probably previously, was asking all kinds of questions. I wonder that's how he got to know everything. Who seemed to know everything, kept asking her all sorts of questions she couldn't answer, as if a 14-year-old girl could know more than he did. The following March, Thoreau sent her a sample of the climbing fern and a letter explaining how it grew, adding gracefully, quote, "The climbing fern would have been a pretty name for some delicate Indian maiden." It was the first of 3 letters he would send her, all of which she said were among her most cherished possessions. I guess getting a nice letter from somebody like him is cherishable. His next stop was Walpole, New Hampshire, to spend a day with Bronson Alcott. To get there, he took the railroad north to Bellows Fall and walked south over Falls Mountain, slipping and sliding all the way down on his smooth-soiled leather shoes, swimming in the Connecticut to wash up, then hitching the last mile into Walpole with a lumberer who said he'd helped get 4 million logs out of Bellows Falls. That's a lot of logs. He helped get 4 million logs. Is that like 4 million trees? He helped, including some of the very mass Thoreau had seen carried through Concord on the railroad. The visit did Alcott good. It had been over a year since the family had moved to Walpole, and the people, he felt, were still strangers. After a morning talking politics, Fremont, Garrison, Emerson, and the rest and an afternoon's walk to view the Connecticut Valley. Alcott penned in his journal, quote, seldom has a scholar's study circumscribed so much of the cosmos as that of this footed intelligence of ours. In his own journal, Thoreau happily listed all the new plants he had gathered and congratulated himself. The Concord River was in every way richer and more various than the Connecticut. Quote, the most fertile in every sense. Really? The real advantage of circumscribing the cosmos was how clearly it enabled him to see home. Makes you want to go out and hunt mushrooms. You like to go in the woods? Why don't you go for a walk in the woods? After his long illness, Thoreau felt anxious.
Why don't you go and get lost?
Get lost in the woods? Why don't I go? Get thrown out with Thoreau? Go through Thoreau thoroughly after being thrown out. Get thorough through. Go thoroughly through Thoreau after being thrown into it. After his long illness, Thoreau felt anxious to write and pressed for time, but instead his perennial need for income took him away from Concord for a hard month of surveying in New Jersey. Seems you have to go work in New Jersey. Alcott had set it up. After their day together in Walpole, he had walked off to New York City, stopping at the Eagles Wood Colony on Raritan Bay, east of Perth Amboy. You know Perth Amboy? Have you been to Perth Amboy? Why not? Isn't it at the new center, satsang center, Perth Amboy, to scout a possible new home for the science of spirituality satsang, to scout a possible new home for his family. The colony was the brainchild of Marcus and Rebecca Spring, liberal Quakers.
He went there, you mean, Thoreau?
Yeah.
That's where we went also.
Yeah.
We went by the woods.
Well, it just said he walked off to New York City. Had he walked off together? He had walked. What does that mean? Walked off. Oh, you took the train. I don't know what it did. The colony was the brainchild of Marcus and Rebecca Spring, liberal Quakers and ardent social reformers. There was a colony, the Eagles Wood Colony. It's in Perth Amboy. In 1846, they had brought Margaret Fuller along on their European grand tour, once Fuller had ventured off to become an Italian revolutionary. Remember Margaret Fuller? His friend somewhere. Beginning of the book. In 1852, the Springs had tried to help the future along by founding their own utopian community, the Raritan Bay Union, modeled on Brook Farm. But it was a financial failure. It's funny, a lot of utopian communities fail, right? Do you think they fail? Would you live in a utopian community and hope for it not to fail? I think they may fail, but the Raritan Bay Union modeled on...
Nothing is utopian in nature.
It's not utopian. Well, the earth plane itself.
A little hummingbird has to go after 1,000
Physical human life is not utopian. There's no utopia.
So why humans would expect them to
Utopia is out of the body, the astral plane, and higher up. By the time Alcott arrived, they were subdividing the land into estates to sell to New York City commuters who would be drawn, they hoped, to live in a land rich with cultural amenities. Now they're selling to New Yorkers. When they mentioned they needed a surveyor, Alcott suggested Thoreau, who not only needed the work but could bring along some culture. He was the living embodiment of culture. Too. So on October 24th, 1856, Henry Thoreau packed up all his available lectures plus compass and tripod and set off for New Jersey. Thoreau goes to New Jersey. You think he could have saved the ecology or the environment in New Jersey? This is a queer place, Thoreau wrote home. It consisted of a huge stone phalanstery, the Springs residence where he stayed, a few shops, an office, and the school. He had arrived on a Saturday afternoon, riding in with Elizabeth Peabody. You think she's related to the Peabody sisters? Just in time for the regular Saturday evening dance, which everyone, even he, was expected to attend. So now he has to dance. Quote, they take it for granted that you want society. Sunday morning was Quaker meeting.
Well, they call that church, I guess.
That they want society. There's a quote here I liked about sort of solitude. It says,
what's the difference between Quaker and Mormon?
Quaker and Mormon are about the same. To me, they're the same. Here's a quote here. It says from Thoreau. It says, "It is not that we love to be alone, but that we love to soar." So I would say, like a person who like goes and hides in solitude to meditate, it's not that he so much wants to be alone, but that he wants to soar. If you could soar with 1,000 people nearby, fine, that would be fine with me. But you can't because they always interrupt you.
It's like the.
You have to be alone.
It is like the albatross. They just alone.
It's not that people want to be alone. They like to be together.
They like to soar.
But if you can't soar with them present, then you want to be alone.
The big birds, when they fly, they are alone.
The big birds fly alone. There's some birds fly together. They take it for granted that you want to fly with other birds or society. Sunday morning was Quaker meeting. And when someone...
Why do they call that Quaker meeting?
Sunday morning, there's church.
Why don't they call it church?
Because to them, it was Quaker meeting.
What do they believe in?
It's the same thing, dear.
They believe the same religion?
Yeah, Quakers are Christians. Quakers are just like these quietistic. They're anti-war. They're, I don't know if they're vegetarian. They believe in inner light, I think. They're pacifist, and they're just sort of like Christians. Sunday morning was Quaker meeting, and when someone warned him, they all expected him to be moved by the Spirit. See, they believe in the Holy Spirit. And you're expected to be moved by the Holy Spirit. Are you moved by Him? Are you moved by the Holy Spirit? What if I expect you to be moved? I expect you to be moved. They expected them to be moved by the Spirit. He prepared a few words, quote, just enough to set them a little by the ear and make it lively. That night he read Moose Hunting to the collective composed mostly, he discovered, of children, and on Monday morning he set to work. The hard work it was, 200 acres, quote, through woods, ravines, marshes, and along the shore, dodging the tide, through catbrier mud and becker ticks, having no time to look up or think where I am. It's amazing he could be like a philosopher and a practical, like, scientist, a surveyor. And as he worked, the job got bigger. The Springs decided he should set out an orchard and vineyards as well, and some of the new owners asked him to survey their plots. This work, the people working get more work, and people working get more work, and people not working don't get any work. Is that why we're not working? God, that's cool. I am sold for the time. I am merely Thoreau the surveyor, or here, he wrote wearily to Blake. But it wasn't all work. On Saturday, November 1st, this is like he goes to New Jersey. Alcott arrived from New York to ask some tough questions after the struggling community's future and whether his family might find a place in it. After spending the evening with Thoreau, in the morning leading a conversation on liberty and responsibility, Thoreau listened approvingly that night as Alcott listened approvingly that night as Thoreau read, quote, Walking, unquote, which he thought the children particularly enjoyed. Seems children-like him. You have to be like a child to like Thoreau. This is kind of parallels our trip to Perth Amboy satsang, where we expected to meditate. Alcott was full of plans. God, we expected to do seva.
And now that area is full of factories. Actually, the way we went there was too many factories.
There's too much pollution there. So I'd have to do seva. Next Saturday, he brought Thoreau out to...
Used to be orchards and vinegar.
Could have been, yeah. Next Saturday, he brought Thoreau out to see Greeley's Westchester farm. The same farm. You know how we go to Westchester. The same farm where Greeley had hoped Thoreau would live for a year or two. Greeley's his publisher. Greeley was good to him. What Thoreau thought is not recorded, but Alcott thought the whole affair. Acres and ditches, barn and crops, man, wife, and children, a disaster in the making. God, do you think becoming a tutor to children can be a disaster?
And where did those quakers go from New Jersey?
What?
Are they still in New Jersey?
The Quakers? Dear, Quakers aren't so active. These communities don't last forever. Remember, they're utopian. And utopian things fail, by definition. It was utopian.
You know?
It's idealistic.
It's a Greek word.
Utopia.
That means there is no place. No place for that.
We can write a book on surviving utopias.
Means no, and topos means place. So utopia is no place.
Is our place of utopia? Do you feel us together is like utopia?
We're not utopians.
We're not utopian?
We're retired.
Well, it says if you combine a barn and crops and a man and a wife and children, it's a disaster in the making. After a night in the city, they crossed on the Brooklyn Ferry. Now we're going to Brooklyn. It's like we're traveling with Thoreau. Crossed on the Brooklyn Ferry to hear Henry Ward Beecher's Sunday sermon. Of course, he sounds famous. The church was crammed to the rafters. God. These are like these ministers. It's a similar time with Emily Dickinson. Remember, you go to listen to sermons and stuff. And they had a period of the revivalism. Remember how there was a religious revival around this time in America, in New England? The church was jammed to the rafters. You find churches jammed to the rafters now, or empty. And Alcott was awed with the sheer spectacle of it, and the congregation weeping and laughing and devout under the great and evangelical powerful magnetism. Thoreau, quote, called it pagan and was restive under it. Thoreau, remember, studied classics at Harvard, and he called the church meeting pagan.
And the Christians called the ancient pagan.
Do you think they had become pagan? It's funny because they called the classics pagan, and he's calling them pagan.
What is a pagan?
A paganism.
What it is?
That's like religions, like pre-Christian religion. That's like following Zeus or something.
So
you're a pagan.
How can the evangelists do that? That's impossible.
You're a pagan. I'm a pagan. I follow Aphrodite, in fact, and Artemis. Artemis, Aphrodite, and Athena. What? I only follow women. Very religious follower of women. Extreme feminist. Then they dropped in on Walt Whitman. Now he comes to the rescue. Cool. This is interesting, Thoreau. This is interesting. What Thoreau meets Walt Whitman. That's nice that they met. But he didn't meet Emily Dickinson. Sad. Then they dropped in on Walt Whitman. The poet was out, but his mother was in, and she fed them with cakes hot from the oven and loving praise for her son, so good and wise, always for the weak against the strong. Her son would be home the next morning, she assured them. After all, he had nothing to do in life but eat, drink, write, and sleep. Do you think he just eats, drink, write, and sleep? Did he invent the t-shirt? Do you want to get a t-shirt that says we just eat, drink, write, and sleep?
How would they live there? Who provided for that?
I just meditate, exercise, eat, write. I don't sleep. And he would be glad to see them. Alcott was eager to introduce Thoreau to Walt Whitman. He had visited the strange new poet a few weeks before and found him full of, quote, brute for power, genius, and audacity. Of course he's full of brute power. He had the body electric.
Who is Eckhart?
Genius and audacity. And what?
Who wants to introduce who is
Alcott.
Who is Alcott?
Bronson Alcott is famous probably himself. The Alcott family. Lisa May Alcott.
He's a writer.
Oh dear, I don't know exactly.
He's the rich one. He doesn't have
No,
to
he's
live
not the
on
rich
money
one.
of
I
his
don't
family.
know. He's not as rich as Ricketson or something. Alcott was eager to introduce Thoreau to Whitman. He had visited the strange new poet a few weeks before and found him full of, quote, brute power, genius, and audacity. That's like having his kundalini fully awakened and having the body electric.
That's impossible.
Walt Whitman, dear, remembers like
Yeah, you can have
sort
the
of
body
enlightened.
electric and also
He's
kundalini.
semi-enlightened poet in the sense of the kundalini, because he says he has the body electric. He has all kinds of mystical stuff. Emerson already knew all this, but especially the audacity. Whitman is audacious. The year before, when Whitman published Leaves of Grass, he had mailed it, a copy, straight to Emerson, who, seeing yet another brilliant new poet to mentor, had written him one of his thrilling trademark letters of support. Remember, his career may have been launched by Emerson. The Boyd Whitman seized on the letter's most quotable line, and to Emerson's horror, blazoned it right across the spine of his next edition. Quote, I greet you at the beginning of a great career. He put it on his book. He stripped off the letter. He stole the line and he put it on the cover of his book. That's like I was to say, your art is great. And you take that and put it right on your book.
Oh, Whitman did that.
Whitman took to Emerson's comment, he put it on his book. He used it for selling his book.
Don't they do that at the back of the book? They put it
Well, you could ask permission, or you can take quotes, yeah. But he didn't ask him even. In one stroke, Whitman had given birth to the modern cover blurb, quite without Emerson's permission. This is the birth of the cover blurb. Like, this book has blurbs, like here, see? There's a blurb, cover blurb. It says like, I'll give an example. Walls has given us a new socially engaged Thoreau for a new era, freedom fighter for John Brown, an American and a necessary prophet and spokesman for conquered in the planet Earth. It's a high comment. You know, one of it says, something here. Achievement is the best all-round biography of Thoreau ever written. So, Robert Richardson says, this book is the best all-around biography of Thoreau ever written. Maybe. Well, we haven't read all of the biographies of Thoreau, so we don't claim to know. Modern cover blurb. We're reading the cover blurb to Henry David Thoreau, A Life. Cover blurb says it's the best biography ever written. So there. Now at last it was Thoreau's turn. Thoreau was deeply interested in Whitman, but still unsure what to make of him. The meeting did not go particularly well. Alcott brought along Sarah Teasdale. No, not Sarah Teasdale. Sarah Tyndale. Who is Tyndale? Sarah Tyndale, a solid walrus of a woman. He called her the kindliest piece of cumbrous candor and common sense. It is unclear whether her candor eased the conversation. Whitman met them at the door and escorted them up 2 flights of stairs to the attic, where the chamber pot stood visible, and the unmade bed still showed the imprint of his body and that of his feeble brother, with whom he shared the room. After some small talk, they removed to the parlor downstairs, where Alcott contrived to set Thoreau and Whitman into direct communication. But the great men sat eyeing each other, quote, like 2 beasts, each wondering what the other would do, whether to snap or run. It's hard sometimes for 2 great men to,
Too much power.
I don't know, Darren. Thoreau feared he got off to a bad start by retorting to Whitman, who declared he represented America. So Whitman represents America. Quote, that I did not think much of America or of politics, and so on, which may have been somewhat of a damper to him. Then someone raised the issue of the Emerson letter, which put Whitman on the defensive. It was a simple thing, he apologized weakly, suggesting the blame rested partly on Emerson. After 2 hours, Alcott ended the interview, leaving Mrs. Tyndale, quote, to have him all to herself. A week later, Thoreau told Blake he was, quote, still in a quandary, unquote, still not sure what to make of Whitman. A man so coarse and rough, yet so gentle and sweet. He's a man who loved, quote, to ride up and down Broadway all day. I like to do that. Do we like to walk Broadway? Do you ride up and down it? On what, a bike? Could ride up and down Broadway on a bike. Or the horse. Or the scooter. Or the skateboard. Or the power skateboard. I would just walk, and now fast walking's popular. Sitting beside the omnibus driver and declaiming Homer at the top of his lungs. What's declaiming Homer mean?
Not claiming.
Declaiming Homer. Whitman is a character. We're going to go to the Walt Whitman house out in Long Island.
I wonder how long was Broadway back then?
Well, remember, Broadway, dear, goes from the base of Manhattan all the way up.
But back then, how far did it go?
It's still the same.
Or as far today?
It goes from Wall Street to the Upper West Side and beyond. Goes to Columbia University. Broadway does.
Back in the 80s, 1800s?
Yeah, Broadway. On Broadway.
Developed Broadway all the way up.
Why do you think it's crooked? Anything old is like a crooked road. It's not. It goes, cuts across Manhattan. We're talking about Manhattan. We're talking about Thoreau meets up with Whitman. And we talked about Thoreau went to New Jersey.
Broadway was developed Broadway with shops and business and houses, not just fields. I don't think walk all of Broadway from down.
Oh, you don't walk all of it, dear. You just walk part of it. Before he left, Whitman gave Thoreau a copy of the 1856 second edition of The Leaves of Grass. So now, interesting, Thoreau can read The Leaves of Grass. The one with Emerson's greeting on the spine, and as soon as he was back in Concord, Thoreau read it through with deep attention. He liked what he saw, quote, it has done me more good than any reading for a long time, unquote. He wrote Blake he especially liked, quote, the Sundown poem. Soon retitled soon retitled, quote, Crossing Brooklyn Ferry. There, it's Crossing Brooklyn Ferry and the famous Song of Myself. Now it's interesting, Thoreau likes Song of Myself. In some ways, Walden is a song of myself, isn't it? As for Whitman's brag, Thoreau declared he had a right to it, a tip of the hat from one Chanticleer to another. So Thoreau gives him a tip of the hat. And as for Whitman's notorious eroticism, Thoreau wrote simply, quote, it is as if the beast spoke, a complex comment from one who had studied the beast.
He's like a beast.
Remember, Thoreau has been studying beast in the woods. Studied the beast with such closeness and empathy that some said the same of himself. Thoreau wished he finally decided not that Whitman had not written such profanity, quote, as that men and women were so pure that they could read it without harm. Well, he wished there wasn't profanity so more people could read it, because it may have been probably banned by a lot of people. The moralist. To make his point, Thoreau carried his new copy of Leaves of Grass around Concord, like a red flag defiantly. Should we just carry around the leaves of grass? In the grass. We could go to Central Park in the grass with the leaves of grass.
Put it on the grass.
As Emerson later told Whitman. As for Whitman, late in life he praised Thoreau's lawlessness and his dissent, his going his own absolute road. Let hell blaze all it chooses, unquote. Emerson's eulogy asserted that three people had profoundly impressed Thoreau, and one of them, he told Sanborn, was Whitman, whose name he later withheld from the eulogy at Sophia's request. He's an embarrassment. So he admired Whitman, but it's not. They withdrew it from the eulogy.
He sees that, Sophia.
Yeah, because Whitman is an embarrassment a bit. Though he's still a great poet. Who's the greatest American poets? Oh, I think they're considered to be Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman.
And the two, and she was afraid to leave him.
You prefer Emily Dickinson than I.
I think those two would get along if they met.
So we're gonna marry Emily to Whitman.
Yeah.
We're writing a book.
They probably got married. They probably met in heaven.
We could do a Netflix series.
And he was very handsome also.
Oh.
And she liked handsome.
We could have Whitman marry Emily. Huh. It might be too erotic, though. But nowadays, that's in style. 2 weeks after his sit-down with Whitman, Thoreau finally finished his labors at Eagles Wood. On his last Sunday there, he read one more lecture. Quote, what shall it profit? Quote, unexpectedly, with some success, this seemed to be a lecture only eccentrics could appreciate. Now, if a lecture only eccentrics appreciate, it might be a good idea not to read it. Blake, who had missed Thoreau on the way down, urged him to stop at Worcester on his return and give another lecture. But the exhausted Thoreau literally couldn't wait to get home. It's hard to travel. On Monday, November 24th, he washed the red New Jersey clay off his hands, packed up his surveying equipment, and headed north. when the train deposited him in Worcester at 3:30 a.m. With several hours to kill before the connection to Concord, he wandered Main Street in the days of fatigue, alarming the night watchman as he cruised past Theo Brown's tailor shop, halfway tempted to rouse his friends out of bed. Relief washed over him the moment he was back on New England's sandy, wholesome land of scrub oaks, birches, and pines, now all in their russet dress. But as he walked in the door, he laughed to see how, in a month, Min the cat had suddenly turned all grown up and stately, puffs, quote, puffed out like a regular grimalkin, with thick and new winter fur. He too must get ready for the winter. Merely charting his boat home through the snow was enough to make him break out into a sweat. Time for some real work. Thoreau turned some of his New Jersey profits into a new pair of cowhide boots, waterproofed against all slush and snow. And that night he gazed at them happily, quote, dreaming of far woods and wood paths, of fresh-bound and sloshy roads. Do you ever dream of sloshy roads? After the stifling air of Eagle's Wood, everything his eye touched turned to gold. Quote, how I love the simple, reserved countrymen, my neighbors who mind their own business and let me alone. He's relieved to get out of that utopian community, I guess. God, I don't think I could take it. He gushed, quote, friends, society, it seems to me I have an abundance of it. There is so much that I rejoice and sympathize with. Everything, he told a friend, is, quote, made for happiness. Wood, earth, mold, etc. exist for joy. Do you think that that Concord River would have continued to flow these millions of years by Clamshell Hill and round Hunt's Island if it had not been happy? You think the river was happy? And here, to top it off, was, quote, that grand old poem called Winter Come Round Again. Quote, I have never got over my surprise that I should have been born into the most estimable place in all the world, and in the very nick of time, too. You think he's a product of his time and place? I don't know if there could have been a Thoreau unless he was
No, not exactly.
in Concord at that time.
He's placed there at a specific time.
We read about
Great time that it was
we read about Thoreau's trip to Perth Amboy. We read a long reading from 390 up to 396, 6 pages, and Thoreau meets Walt Whitman. And I think that Walden is kind of like Thoreau's Song of Myself. And we discussed the two greatest American poets as being Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman. So we expressed our opinion. It's not professional.
I don't know.
Do you think it's unprofessional?
I don't think Walt Whitman would go second after everything.
Second?
No.
He would go second?
No.
Who's second then?
I like Emerson also.
But he's not. Emerson is not as famous poet.
Give me some other names.
Robert Frost and I don't know.
Anybody else?
Jared Teasdale. You're the one who knows poetry. Dear, I don't know. I mean,
he is very powerful.
I'm talking about the opinion of scholars now.
Yeah, Chinese. He is too powerful to not put him second.
I just follow what Harold Bloom says, because I'm a Bente. I believe in Yale more than Harvard. I'm just kidding. Who was a great poet? Well, if we were, but I said earlier that I was an extreme feminist, so why?
Alexa, who are
No,
the
don't
three
bring her
greatest
in.
poets in the United States?
Alexa, who are the most famous poets, American poets?
The most popular poet by Wikipedia page views is Jane Wilde at 2,700.
Dear,
well,
there you go.
2020.
We asked Alexa because we didn't want to have a biased opinion coming from us, so we'll cite Harold Bloom as the highest authority on the issue.
Okay.